So how many of you are community college teachers? All you pretty much? In ICT, I assume. How much, do you have a lot of interaction with your counselors, or how have you supported your counselors in the past?
I can say that we've tried.
We've tried. I'll start the back and come up. Did you have a comment? Do you work with your counselors at all? I do.
I've given informational settings or sessions for them. They have an opportunity for faculty to come in and talk about their programs. We're trying to set up meetings because we have counselors who are just for certain areas. Their schedule, they get kind of difficult to sit down with them.
So when you say counselors for a special area, like say for ICT or particular career?
So ICT is one of the areas. So this group of counselors only does like things under vocational education.
Okay, all right.
So
they're CTE counselors.
Yes.
Yeah. That's a good model. A lot of districts don't even have that. That's great. Well, one of the things, as James was saying in his talk, I think Steve had mentioned the same thing, is that we've got to kind of raise the awareness. If once the counselors really understand what the opportunities are and feel comfortable talking about it. And so that's the intent. So I want to talk a little bit about the objectives of the toolkit, who it's really aimed at, the audience, and then we'll talk about the content that's included in the toolkit. MPICT.org, okay, and then right in kind of the middle there's a blue bar, the link, you can all that tool. Right, so right here you can load the document, and so there's an ICT counselor. Thank you, Pierre. And then there's some suggestions on how to use Toolkit. And this most recent version, I had the help, and I think that Steve there he is. Steve and the sector navigators put together a really nice little guidance document for counselors that really went into a little bit more depth about particular, the kind of based on the talk he gave this morning about basically what is the sector all about. And I didn't have that in the toolkit, and I thought it was a great addition. So this toolkit is a collaboration between the two of us in putting together what we feel would be helpful for counselors. So, why do we need a toolkit? Well, I think, I've been hearing about counselor load for a long time. The ratio of counselors to students just continues to increase. And so there's really not a lot of time for them to actually go out and do this research on their own unless they do things, such as this gentleman shared here, where they actually take the time to meet with faculty. And then it's a constantly, the programs are constantly changing. The sector is constantly changing. And the jobs that you're talking about are changing. So it's really a difficult sector to keep up with. And so one of the things that we have to think about here is, when the content changes so much, you can get yourself on this treadmill of constantly having to, be in this update cycle. So one of the thoughts that I considered was, what kind of strategies can you share with counselors about how they can keep current themselves, or what kind of positions, such as a specialized counselor, just things that you can do to make that change a little bit more, that you'll be able to deal with it a bit more. I think the other thing, too, about counseling I think is really important is that it helps to address the equity gap. So many, when you think about how our demographic is changing in this country, not only this, I think this state is actually a little microcosm of the whole country. where pretty soon the majority of our population is going to be non-white. And unfortunately, in ICT, it's the complete opposite. You know, you have a white male. And so how are we going to attract and raise awareness of these opportunities for these jobs? We've got this huge labor force that are not going to be prepared for these jobs. And so it's really important that we take a look at how do we help counselors do outreach to underrepresented students. So, you know, I think this toolkit is for anybody that influences a student's decision. So it's not just counselors. I think a lot of times it's helpful for the teachers to understand, like for instance, some of the information that Steve shared with me about, you know, how the sector is defined, what types of jobs are out there for those particular subsectors. You know, what are some of the pay scales? Those are the types of things that if everybody knew that was in contact with a student making a decision, you know, at least to be able to direct them with some information that would give them that, but be able to first recognize that that's what they were talking about. So not just counselors, you know, administrators and teachers. So the order of the toolkit is like do a sector overview, and most of that is a lot of good labor market information, definition of the sectors. And then those strategies that we talked about, where I said, well, you know, how do we figure out ways to stay on top of the change? And then where I did most of the research for the toolkit were the online resources. And so the most significant part of the toolkit are resources, links to websites that both counselors and students can go to give information about this sector and the jobs and the pay. And we'll talk a little bit more about that because it goes beyond that. I mean, it could really there are a lot of tests around, you know, is this the job for you? What are the things? A lot of times, you know, students don't know what they want to do, so those types of resources. So in the sector overview, we talk about, you know, what is ICT? And it goes over the supply-demand gap and the outlook, a lot of similar to the data that we heard this morning. How the sector navigators define the subsectors, and what are some of the hot entry-level jobs. So if you go to that page right now, if you're looking at the toolkit, it is right under the agenda on the front page of the website, MPICT.org. No, this is just the toolkit. So you already have that. So if you're looking at that first section, you'll see some of the similar definitions that Steve shared with us this morning. That is three subsections, three sectors of ICT. It's all familiar to do with this.
I was interested in another way.
So as you pointed out, it kind of points out how there are the three sectors. There's computer science, there's IT, the infrastructure, network infrastructure, and there's digital media. And then it goes on to talk about, and I'm going to stay on my presentation because I don't want to confuse the recording or go into any technical difficulties just in case. But I'm assuming you're all kind of looking at the toolkit. And there's some really good information there because one of the things I really find gets the interest of students is that, you know, you talk about salaries. It really gets the attention. And particularly if it's around something that they're even moderately interested in, it will pique it, at least enough to be curious about it. And so I really think sharing some of this information has been really very helpful in getting students to at least begin to pursue, how do I do this? What courses do I need to take? So that's when we start off with this. And we'll talk a little bit about something that we're doing in San Francisco that does that right out front, is that, you know, we talk about when we put up a job title, we put the salary right underneath it, and then they click on it and see, well, what do they do? I like that salary, but what do they do? Right? And we go from there. But really, it's really very, very important information. Okay. The other thing that I think is really helpful for counselors to know is to understand this huge gap that we have. You know, we're talking about, as discussed this morning, 1 million jobs. And, you know, particularly for, you know, a lot of kids that are growing up from underrepresented groups, you know, a lot of their parents, if they were like mine, you know, when I expressed interest in music, you know, my father said, no, you got to go to school to get a job, right? And so a lot of the times they're driven by, you know, a lot of underrepresented kids are driven by wanting to find work and wanting to find it quickly. Okay. So again, I think there's another reason to really understand that if counselors have a sense of that, you know, gap between supply and demand, and particularly the types of jobs that are needed, and then we'll get into the pathways later. But really, what are some of those jobs, and which of those jobs are entry level? There are some high demand entry level jobs out there, and I really think that I really agree with the strategy that was discussed this morning, that start to get the experience. If it's a help desk operator, if it's a network, if you're a computer operator or a network analyst, a project coordinator on a small project, those are good entry-level jobs that employers, at least here from studies that we've done in the Bay Area in California, are looking for. And it's a start while the student can continue to go to school and either keep on that transfer path or get stackable certificates to an AS, you know, whatever. But those are jobs that once you get a certificate, there's a really, really good possibility that you can find entry-level work. How many of you are familiar with the Europe? Europe, okay. They're a really good example of that, where they train the participants in the program for just 6 months. They take a really intense 6 months of training of not only a couple of courses from City College, but also on those career skills, life skills, work readiness skills. And then they have 6-month internship at all kinds of industries here, everywhere from LinkedIn to Wells Fargo. And then, in most cases, at least I'm told, that they have a pretty high percentage of hire after the 6 months. But they got 6 months. They got 6 months of training for this job. So it's getting the experience, getting the preliminary training, the work skills I talked about are really important. We know that. Okay. And we'll talk a little bit about that later. How do they get those? But anyway, so we shouldn't take for granted that, you know, you're going to need to finish that degree or that full sequence of certificates to begin to get that experience. And those are the other things that hopefully this toolkit will show, make counselors more aware of that. Some of the counseling strategies that we're applying, and I want to just give a little bit of background. This morning when I introduced Brenda, one of the things I mentioned was that we're, MPICT is involved with the San Francisco ICT Pathways project. And a lot of the examples and practices and even some of the data and links in this toolkit are the result of the work that we've done in making San Francisco Unified and City College students more aware of ICT pathways. And one of the best practices that we found was having a specialized counselor. And we actually took this from another program, STEM-related program at City College called Bridge to Biotech. If you haven't heard of that, Bridge to Biotech is, again, it's very similar to what I was talking about, how they outreach is usually to women and underrepresented students. They come in and they do 6 weeks of really contextualized training, but part of that program is a counselor that is involved with those students in helping them select the right classes, staying with them during the whole time they're in the pathway toward the actual internship for the biotech program. And that counselor knows about not only the programs, but about the industry. And it's a very, very successful program, also based out of City College. So the specialized counselor, if you have that luxury, again, it is, because there are so few, it is, not something that often will fit into budgets. But it is very successful to be able to do that. And even if those counselors are maybe just ICT, but maybe they're all a CTE, that's a start. The other thing that we've done is promotion, and one of the outcomes of that is we have we're developing. You can certainly take a look at it. It's in development stage. We have a website called sf-ict.org. This isn't in the toolkit because it's really in development. But one of the things that we found in getting feedback on the site was what I was mentioning to you before. If you come to the site and you say, here are hot jobs and this is what they make, you click on that and it goes into the description and you can see really what are some of the hot jobs here in San Francisco and what they're paying across all 3 of the subsectors. Coding for programmers and web app developers for computer science, web design and user interface for digital media, and then also some of the security analysts and network analysts for the ICT. And the site is really about making high school students aware of where does if I was taking a class in at one of the academies, I think it's called CASP, I don't know what that stands for, but it's like it's one of the most, it has the biggest draw of high school students are those classes where they can come and learn Adobe products, the digital media. Digital media, is the big attractor for high school students. And so, but where do they go from there? How do those programs at San Francisco Unified link to programs at either their visual media design department or the broadcast and electronic media arts department? Where do they go? And so what we've done is we've began to define what those pathways are. What are the options? Because a lot of times they could go either to BEMA, broadcast electronic media, or they can go to visual media design. Both of those are really good starting points. So we're beginning to define those pathways, and we're eventually going to have those on site. So those, again, we want to promote those linkages. And then another thing that we've been doing, also in collaboration with San Francisco Unified, is every spring, the City College does what's called Frisco Day. And Frisco stands for Fridays for Fridays S for college. No, Friday for successful college opportunities or something like that. But it was the word, try to get a play on the word Bristol. And so all of the high school seniors who have stated an intention to come to a city college program, whether it doesn't matter what campus, any city college program, come to this event, and the whole idea is to start the whole matriculation. So they register, they take there's the required tests that they need for English, math, and at the same time, they have all of these great workshops where they can learn about the clubs on campus and the programs in the different departments. And so we started doing workshops, bringing in near-peer speakers to talk about how they went to City College and now they're doing this, and or they're currently in the program and they're almost done, or they're working for a nonprofit. They're working with a nonprofit like Bay Area Video Coalition as an intern. They've been placed as an intern. So we come and we have near peers tell those stories, and so those types of career events are the ones that we've gone on to. But that's just one example. I mean, pretty much every district does at least one of these. High school district, in collaboration usually with community college, does at least one of these events a year. So, encourage your counselors to, they usually are, but encourage your counselors to be involved with that, and then work with you. That's the way where you can help them, is how they're going to be involved and they're going to go to these events. But what ICT stories are you going to tell them? What type of information do you need to give to them to share at those events? So I talked about that. Bridge to Biotech was an example. The other thing that we've done is we've created collateral. This is an example of, this is just the front side of a piece that talks about the 5 different departments that at City College that have ICT-related programs. So they're at least aware of when they start asking questions, at least at City College, you might be able to pursue some of these pathways. So it's about, again, raising the awareness. We also have, we invested a lot into a 3-fold flyer for every single high school. There's 17 high schools at the San Francisco Unified. And so we did an inventory to say what courses are related to ICT careers at this school. In addition to that, what community-based organizations can you go get other other training, such as Mission Bit, which does after-school coding programs. As I mentioned, Bay Area Video Coalition, who has what they call digital pathways. We talk about dual enrollment. We put the dual enrollment contacts information in these flyers. And so there's one for every school, and we have to update. That's one thing about paper, is you have to update it. We're in the process now of preparing our second print. But those are, I mean, we're just really pleased with how the high school teachers and counselors are using those flyers to give them out, because it has contact information and information about where they can go from there. So again, I talked about our project, what it's all about. The other thing that we're doing is we're on the website that we're developing, is that a lot of times, one of the counselors that when I was initially looking into, what do you guys need? I mean, what type of information would help you inform students who are interested in, say, for instance, becoming a web developer? And the counselor said, well, I need to understand the sequence of courses so that I can just, give the students some guidance as to, what steps, what courses do they have to take to get to that first certificate. And you would think that that's in the catalog, but, sometimes when it's listed, it's really hard to tell. You've got this long list of courses that a department offers, but which one is actually going to lead to that Web Foundation certificate? Which set of courses? And so that's one of the things that we've begun to do as well. And we're starting with certificates. We haven't even gone to the degrees yet. We just want to start with the certificates. Because again, the emphasis that we really are wanting to make is get what you need to begin to get your experience. So this is an example. So we have the sequence of courses, the potential jobs, and the potential starting salary in the San Francisco area. But this is something that I think this is something that any college district can do. I mean, you can work together, put together these kind of sequences and share them with your counselors. And I can't stress enough how important it is also to get that job market data to match with this. And I think that's where it takes a little work, and that's maybe, I don't know if not all counselors are new. A lot of the counselors that I talked to did not have that information. For video and production and editing, these are just some examples of some of the certificates that we're showing on the sites. I talked about the events. Back and some of their career. There are partners when it comes to bringing in near peers, former or current City College students to talk to high school students. So, so that's basically any questions about the approaches or the reasons that maybe that won't work, or difficulties in getting the market data, comments before I go on and talk about the online resources?
I was involved in writing a tax grant, and part of the idea of the grant we didn't get was to fund an additional position in the counseling offices to focus on ICT and digital media. And we figured we'd deal with the problem if we got the money, but we got a lot of pushback from the administration saying you cannot fund a counselor-type person called a counselor because of job descriptions, who's a counselor, and this and that sort of thing. I was wondering in your listing of the specialized counselor for ICT, it's assumed that is a hired counselor that meets the criteria to be in that job, or whether that would be an auxiliary person.
A good question, because actually that counselor at the Bridge to Biotech program is paid for by the BioLink NSF Center Fund. Okay, so that may be why they've been able to sustain it. BioLink's been around for a long, long time, and so has his counselor. But we ran into the same thing on our first bid for AB 86 between San Francisco and City College. That was one of the things that we had in we didn't get it. Now I don't think that, I don't know. I don't remember that in the feedback. But that was one of the things that we thought would be helpful too, is to have a counselor, someone who
is outside the industry. Maybe just help understanding the college, but they definitely do have counseling students on where the jobs are.
And it's interesting that you got that feedback, because those grants that have been, the grant applications that have been successful have been those that use market data to make their cases. So you would think that it's important. Anyway, no, I don't know. I think I take that back. I don't try to figure out San Francisco Unified. I don't. I have a hard enough time with City College of San Francisco.
Yeah, you know, it kind of raised the question, maybe we should look at trying to build a industry counselor type team somehow through the Chancellor's office or maybe through industry itself, and have that available to our students even before they get to the colleges. Kind of an external entity that doesn't fall under that whole administrative nightmare.
Well, there's a lot of Kirk Cafe does a great job.
Good job, yeah.
But I think you guys would automate it. But what we began to realize was that a lot of these people need someone to not only hear where they think they'd like to go, but they can interpret their personal lives a little bit and help them with maybe social issues and maybe getting some access to aid in some way. So there's a combination package to help the student.
It's also important that they contact somebody who cares.
Yeah, it must need to be a lot.
Yeah. Well, you know, another thing too is that I mentioned Year Up because in my work with I on my own I go and speak to the groups occasionally, and not only the students going through the program, but I also speak to the teachers in the program. And you know, one of the things that is difficult, and I think that's what the point that Brenda was making, is that how do you connect with these? How do you connect enough to identify an interest? A lot of times, you know, the young people I've talked to, they're still trying to figure that out. And so, you know, how do you connect with them to be able to identify the passion or whatever it is that's exciting them in their lives, and then make a connection to some career path? And then a lot of times it's not one size fit all too. You know, we can't take for granted that we understand what a student has the gauntlet that they must go through from the time they get up in the morning and put their feet on the ground out of bed to the seat in your class.
It's also a little bit of math anxiety. Like,
yeah.
So you need to have math together.
Yeah, and you know, but the thing is, one of the things that's what I mean by recognizing the need is that, you know, there's a lot of things you can identify with the ability to deal with math, and it's really not like for example, one of the things I know for girls, and Myron, we talked about this in the IWIS class, and that is, you know, if you've ever taken a home ec class and made a dress out of a pattern. Young women that sew, or young people that play music, or whatever. There are things that they do that are indicators that if they believe that they're not good in math, that's not true, because they would not be able to do those things that they take for granted. If
they're being told that
they're being told that they can't. So that's what I'm saying. If you get to know the student, and that's what counselors, obviously, that's what they're trained to do. And I'm not trained. I don't have any training in counseling at all. That's what they do well. But what we're trying to do is help them connect that with possible opportunities. You know, instead of just as I think somebody said, I think it might have been you, Steve, that you know, you come in and you say, okay, what do you want to do? Not sure. Well, I'm going to put you on the transfer track. And a lot of times that's one of the reasons we lose them, because that transfer track is just not interesting. So how do we find that spark that might, you know, show that they're interested in some of the items?
That's why I wanted to come to your session. I think focusing on the toolkit for counselors. And they were begging for that. Remember career counseling?
Yeah.
Conferences. They're coming up to our ICT table and saying, what can we tell them? Give me something, you know? And we had prepared a little package, but that was it. And they didn't realize that, you know, they already gave us everything we're trying to do.
Right.
We're not giving them the tools. You've listed a lot of wonderful stuff up here.
And like I said, this is just the beginning. I mean, I think I really am looking for input and ideas. What else we can do here? There's a lot out there. I mean, this list here. This is the online resources. The California Career Cafe is fabulous, but it's for everything. But the great tools there are about, you know, it allows the student to do a little discovery about their own interests. What might they be interested in? It gives them a little bit of look into the future, that if I went to this pathway, this is what I might be able to do. They have a lot of really great tools there about, you know, understanding the importance of life skills and work skills and career skills. There's a lot of great resources for all of that. I think, you know, that one, that's probably my favorite site. The other one that I think is fantastic is NCWIC, National Center for Women in Technology. Because most of the tools there basically could be used for anybody. The talking points address some of those issues about, you know, how do you talk to a student who has a fear of math? It has a wonderful long list of talking points. Talking to a parent. A lot of times it's a parent that you're talking to, a counselor or a teacher is interacting with about, you know, getting their kid interested in math. The National Alliance for Partnerships and Equity. This is a really good one in looking at reaching underrepresented students, and really great tools there around. I think some of the best ones I think are around micro-messaging. And by micro-messaging, I mean some of the terms that we may use in a classroom or in talking to a student, and we aren't aware that it is maybe conveying some bias that we have. And I teach, and one of the things I have to always remember when I'm giving feedback to my students is to always begin with the positive, and then when I'm presenting the negative, I'm presenting it from the you know, basically the half full viewpoint. Because we don't realize, and I think there's another thing too that a lot of these sites point out, is that as teachers we really don't, we underestimate the impact that we can have on a young person. Even, I'm talking about even 18, 19, 20 years old, certainly for K through 12, but even in community college. So messaging, how we get across as a technology, teachers teaching technology, is really very important, that we don't continue to, you know, perpetuate that mythology, that perception that people have about this sector. I found that the American Job Center and Career One Stop, those are all very thorough sites too. A lot of information. I think they're probably more useful to the counselors than the students because they do take some navigation, or to sit down, that the counselor is sitting down with the student as they go through it. It's a lot of information that might be put off because there's so much information. And then the other was ACM Computing Career Sites. That's a very good one, that's focusing more on computer science, which is good ones there. So these are all, what I've done in the toolkit, if you look, you'll see there's at least a page description for each one of these sites. specifics about sections of the sites and what they can be used for, and the links are there. And then this is the part of the toolkit that I have to revisit pretty regularly because the links change. But I do that. I try to do that on a quarterly basis. And then I mentioned to you that I'm really anxious to get the San Francisco ICT.org website up. That's the awareness website that I mentioned. And do note it and watch it. I expect the next big update to occur at the beginning of February for the sf-ict.org. And I think it's a really good example of what you could put together in your districts. It really hasn't. It has been pretty simple to get it up because it's all in WordPress. I think that the delay has been the same web developer that's doing that site is also in the process of updating the MPICT site. So I have to compete priority there. So anyway, really looking for. I really hope that you take a look at the toolkit. Please provide any. I have my contact information there. Please provide any feedback, comments, any broken links, and I really appreciate it.